Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 through 18.
Right.
And, as always, we've got the text in front of us and some pretty great notes and analysis and commentaries to help us make sense of this passage.
Yeah, and it's a really powerful passage.
Oh, yeah.
I think, one of the things that I noticed right away was this tension
Mm,
between hope and resilience
right.
that the author's trying to convey.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating to me right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because clearly whoever wrote this was going through some stuff.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time is offering this message of, incredible hope and perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you wonder, how can someone be facing, such difficulty
Right.
and still be encouraging others to, hold on to hope?
Yeah.
That seems almost paradoxical.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's what I'm hoping we can uncover today, is how can we just, like the author of this text, find that kind of inner strength
Right.
when we're struggling?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the first things that really jumped out at me
Yeah.
when I was reading this passage was this idea of spiritual blindness,
Oh, yeah.
which is mentioned right there in verse 4.
Right. The God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not.
Right.
That's some pretty strong imagery.
It is, yeah.
So who is this God of this world?
Yeah.
And how does that idea connect with, challenges that we might be facing in our own lives today?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you can interpret it in a couple of different ways.
Hmm.
Some people see it as a direct reference to Satan,
Okay.
while others might view it as more of a general representation of evil or deception or the forces in the world that kind of
Right.
keep people from the truth.
Yeah. And I noticed, too, that this whole idea of truth being like a light,
Yes.
that keeps coming up throughout the passage.
Right.
In verse 6, it talks about how God who commanded the light to shine out of darkness
Yes.
shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God
Right.
in the face of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's really crucial because it connects the idea of the light with the knowledge of God.
Right.
And so knowledge and understanding are what guide us.
Yeah. It's like that knowledge acts as a kind of a compass,
Right.
helping us to kind of navigate through all the darkness and confusion
Mm-hmm.
that we might encounter in life.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that everybody can relate to,
Yeah.
whether they're, religious or not.
Yeah,
We all have our own darkness to kind of grapple with.
absolutely. And so, when we have that knowledge and understanding that God gives us,
Right.
that becomes the light that we can use to navigate these difficult times.
Okay, so we're starting to get a sense of, we've got this contrast between light and darkness.
Right.
We've got, this idea that there's something out there that might be trying to blind us to the truth. But then we get to verse 5, and it's this beautiful expression of humility.
Yes.
For we preach not ourselves, but Christ Jesus the Lord, and ourselves your servants for Jesus' sake.
Right.
And this whole idea of being a servant rather than seeking fame or attention for yourself
Mm-hmm.
really jumps out at me because it seems like the opposite of what we see so much of today.
Right.
It's all about self-promotion and chasing after celebrity status and.
It really does make you think about our own motivations,
Yeah. Are we genuinely trying to help others and serve a greater purpose? Or are we more preoccupied with our own image and how other people see us? Yeah. Are we genuinely trying to help others and serve a greater purpose?
Yeah.
Or are we more preoccupied with our own image and how other people see us?
Right.
And then we get to this really striking analogy in verse 7.
Mm-hmm.
Treasure in earthen vessels.
Right.
What a powerful image.
Yes, it really is. And I think it speaks to the value of the message
Right.
that's being shared.
The
treasure, right, and the fragility of the messengers.
the earthen vessel.
Yeah, earthen vessels, right, because we're all
Yeah.
susceptible to weakness and
It's
human,
human.
right?
And I think what's so interesting to me is that it's almost like admitting our weaknesses.
Right.
Letting those cracks show can actually make us stronger.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's true.
Because then it's not about us anymore.
Right.
It's about something greater kind of shining through.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the key messages of this passage
Okay.
is that, even though we are weak,
Right.
God's strength can be made perfect
Mm.
in our weakness.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're talking about strength. We're talking about resilience.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't ignore the tough stuff either.
Right.
I mean, verses 8 through 10
Yeah.
don't sugarcoat the hardships that the author was facing.
No, they don't.
We see words like troubled, perplexed, persecuted, even cast down.
Yeah. The author is definitely going through some really difficult things.
What's interesting, though, is that these experiences are always kind of presented alongside these affirmations of resilience.
Right.
It's like this weird juxtaposition, you
Yeah.
know, troubled on every side, yet not distressed,
Mm.
perplexed, but not in despair,
Mm-hmm.
persecuted, but not
Yep.
forsaken, cast down, but not destroyed.
Yeah.
It's like they're holding two completely opposite things at the same time.
Yeah. How do you make sense of that?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think the message is there about resilience in the face of hardship?
Well, to me, it's about acknowledging that suffering is real,
Mm.
but that it doesn't have the final say.
Okay.
There's something deeper.
Yeah.
There's an inner strength
Right.
that we can draw on.
Okay, so it's like even when we're surrounded by difficulty, there's this core strength within us that can't be extinguished.
Yeah, and it can't be taken away.
Right.
And that's what allows us to be resilient.
And then there's that incredibly powerful line in verse 12.
Yes.
So then death worketh in us, but life in you.
Now, that one really makes you think.
It does.
How can our own struggles potentially benefit others?
Yeah.
How does that work?
I think it has to do with empathy.
Hmm.
When we go through hard times,
Right.
it makes us more compassionate,
Yeah.
more understanding
Okay.
of what other people are going through.
So it's like by sharing in the sufferings of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
by, enduring hardship for the sake of spreading the gospel,
Right.
the author is demonstrating this profound love for others.
Yes.
And that love, that selflessness, can have this ripple effect and talking to inspiring and uplifting
Yeah.
those who witness it.
It's like saying, hey, look, I'm going through this,
Right.
but I haven't given up hope.
Yeah.
And maybe seeing that will give you hope too.
Okay, so now we're starting to see that, our struggles can actually be a source of strength for other people,
Yeah.
that they can help us to connect with others on a deeper level.
Right.
And then we move into this idea of looking beyond what's right in front of us,
Mm-hmm.
beyond, the tangible and the immediate.
Yeah.
Verses 16 through 18 really emphasize the importance of focusing on the unseen,
Right.
on the eternal.
Absolutely. And what's so powerful about that is this contrast that the author highlights between
Yeah.
the temporary nature of our earthly concerns
Right.
and the enduring nature of spiritual realities.
So the author's urging us to shift our perspective,
Yes.
to look beyond just the material and the fleeting towards something more lasting.
Exactly.
It's like, don't get so bogged down in the day-to-day struggles that you lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right.
And for the author, that bigger picture is rooted in faith,
Mm-hmm.
in the promise of something beyond this earthly existence.
Absolutely.
And that raises a really important question for each of us.
Yeah.
What are those unseen values or aspirations that guide our own lives?
Right.
What gives us a sense of purpose even when things are tough?
It's a great question to reflect on.
It is,
Yeah.
because I think we all have those things, those anchors that kind of keep us grounded,
Yeah.
even when life feels like a storm raging all around us.
All right.
And, finding those anchors, nurturing them, maybe that's a big part of what this whole passage is trying to tell us.
I think you're right. And one thing I've been thinking about
Yeah.
as we've been talking is that this focus on the unseen, on the eternal, it's not about escaping the present moment. It's about drawing strength and inspiration
Right.
from a source that transcends our immediate circumstances.
Yeah, it's like tapping into this wellspring of hope that never runs dry.
Exactly.
It's a powerful idea to hold on to.
It is. And as we continue to explore this passage, I think we're going to see how this theme of hope keeps unfolding in some really amazing ways.
All right, so listeners, stay with us.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to go even deeper into the heart of 2 Corinthians chapter 4.
All right. Picking up on that idea of hope, I think it's worth looking a little closer at how this passage portrays resilience and how that's connected to the author's own experiences.
Yeah, because even though we were just talking about focusing on, the unseen and the eternal,
Right.
there's also this really raw acknowledgement of suffering in the here and now. It's not about, pretending everything is okay.
No, not at all. In
Yeah.
fact, if we look back at, some of the things we were just talking about,
Yeah.
the author lists out all these different hardships, troubles, perplexity, persecution, being knocked down.
Right. It's like a
Yeah.
litany of terrible things.
Yeah, it paints a pretty stark picture.
Yeah.
But I think the key, at least from my perspective, is how those experiences are framed.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What specifically stood out to you about how those challenges are described?
Okay, well, think about the structure of those verses.
Okay.
Each hardship is immediately followed by this statement of resilience.
Yeah.
Troubled on every side, yet not distressed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, cast down, but not destroyed. It's like this rhythmic back and forth.
It is, yeah,
Mhm.
between struggle and strength.
Right. It's like the author saying, yeah, all these awful things are happening, but they don't have the final say.
Yeah.
I'm still here. I'm still fighting.
Exactly, and that's what I find so powerful about it.
Yeah.
It's this simultaneous acknowledgement of suffering
Right.
and this unwavering belief in the ability to rise above it.
To find hope, even in the darkest of times.
Yes, exactly.
That makes me think about that really intense line from verse 12.
Yeah.
So then death worketh in us, but life in you. How does that connect to what we're talking about here? How can our struggles actually end up benefiting other people?
That's a great question, and I think the author is saying that even in their suffering, even when facing death, something transformative is happening. Their willingness to endure these hardships for the sake of spreading the gospel brings life and hope to others.
Okay.
It's like this incredibly powerful act of
Right. So even though things might be falling apart for them personally.
they're choosing to use that experience to build something up for others.
Exactly.
It's finding purpose and meaning even in the midst of pain.
Yes. And I think that purpose, that sense of serving something greater,
Right.
is actually what sustains them through all their trials.
Hmm.
It's what allows them to say in verse 16, for which cause we faint. But though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's that contrast again, the outer versus the inner.
Right.
So even if the physical body is suffering and weakening, there's this simultaneous inner strengthening, this spiritual renewal happening at the same time.
Right. And that renewal comes from faith, from this belief that there's something more than just this earthly life.
Yeah.
It's that conviction that's expressed in verse 17. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory.
That's a powerful statement.
It is.
So the message here is that we shouldn't get so caught up in the immediate struggles, that we lose sight of the bigger picture, the eternal perspective. Our hardships here are temporary,
Yes.
but the rewards of faith, the glory that awaits, that's eternal
Immeasurable.
and immeasurable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not about passively accepting suffering,
Right.
but finding a way to transform it
Yeah.
into something meaningful,
Exactly.
something that inspires others.
Right.
And speaking of taking action, there's this link between faith and actually speaking out.
Yeah.
That comes up in verse 13.
Mm-hmm.
It says, we're having the same spirit of faith, according as it is written, I believe and therefore have I spoken. We also believe and therefore speak.
I love that you brought that up
Yeah.
because I think that verse really highlights the connection between our beliefs and how we live our lives.
Right.
How we talk, how we interact with the world.
It's walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True faith isn't just a private thing.
Right.
It should manifest in our words and our actions.
So it's like, if you truly believe in something, you can't help but talk about it.
Right.
You can't help but let it shape how you act.
And so it raises this question for all of us. How do our own beliefs, our own convictions
Right.
shape how we engage with the world?
That's such a good point to reflect on.
It is.
Because it's easy to say we believe in something,
Right.
but are our actions really backing that up?
Yeah.
Do we have the courage to speak up for what we believe in, even when it's hard or unpopular?
It's this ongoing process
Yeah.
of self-reflection
Yeah.
and making sure our words and actions are aligned with
Yeah.
our deepest values.
With those unseen realities that guide our lives.
Exactly.
And maybe that sometimes means being willing to be vulnerable, to admit our weaknesses, to let those cracks show, like we were talking about earlier.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Because it's often in those moments of vulnerability when we acknowledge our human limitations that God's power can truly shine through.
Yeah. There's that treasure in earthen vessels idea again.
Yes.
It's such a simple image, but so profound.
And as we continue to explore this passage, I think we'll see how this theme of vulnerability, of finding strength in weakness, continues to weave its way through the text.
Okay, so listeners, stay tuned. We're about to dive even deeper into the heart of 2 Corinthians 4. We've been talking a lot about resilience and, finding strength in challenges
Right.
and how vulnerability can actually be a source of power.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think about one of the big themes we see throughout this passage, this idea of light versus darkness.
Yes.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that contrast between light and darkness is so central to understanding this passage. Right from the beginning, we see this juxtaposition of the light of the glorious gospel of Christ with the spiritual blindness that's caused by the God of this world, as mentioned in verse 4.
Right, and that imagery of light, it just keeps popping up throughout the whole passage.
It does.
Like in verse 6, where it says that God shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ.
Right. It's like a beacon cutting through the darkness,
Yeah.
illuminating the truth.
So it's not just about, gritting our teeth and enduring hardship.
Right.
It's about finding a source of light that can actually guide us through those dark times.
Exactly. And, for the author, that source of light is found in the gospel, in Jesus Christ, and in the promise of resurrection and eternal life.
Right.
And it's what allows him to declare in verse 16, for which cause we faint not. But though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day.
There's that contrast again, the outward versus the inward, the temporary versus the eternal.
Right.
So even though the physical body might be going through difficult things,
Yeah.
the spirit, the inner self, is constantly being renewed by that source of light.
It's a powerful image of hope.
Yeah, it really is. So no matter what difficulties we face in life, no matter how dark things may seem, there's always a source of light, a source of strength available to us.
If we choose to seek it out.
If we choose to seek it out.
Yeah.
Right? So that raises the question, how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we tap into that wellspring of hope, especially when we feel like, overwhelmed by the darkness?
Well, I think faith plays a crucial role.
Hmm.
It's about trusting in something beyond what we can see or touch,
Right.
something that transcends our current circumstances.
Okay.
Believing that even in the midst of suffering, even in the face of death, there's a purpose, there's a plan, there's a greater good at work.
And that faith, that belief is what fuels that resilience that we've been talking about.
Right.
It's what allows us to face those challenges with courage and with determination,
It is.
knowing that we're not alone, that we're being guided and supported by power greater than ourselves.
It's about choosing to focus on the unseen, on the eternal, even when we're surrounded by the temporary and the fleeting.
Yeah, remembering that the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal.
Yes, exactly.
Colorful words from verse 18.
It is.
It's about choosing to see the light, even when we're surrounded by darkness. But, that's not always easy.
No, it's a constant struggle.
It is.
It's a choice we have to make again and again.
Right. But the author is offering us a roadmap,
He is.
a way to navigate those difficult times.
Absolutely.
And to find that strength and that hope that we need to keep going.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, that roadmap involves embracing our vulnerability, focusing on the eternal, and letting our faith inspire our actions in the world.
I think you're absolutely right.
And so I think maybe a final thought-provoking question to leave our listeners with
Okay.
is this: how can we, like those earthen vessels, carry the treasure of our own values and beliefs into the world, even when facing challenges? What kind of impact might we have if we allow our own inner light to shine, even in the darkest of times?
That is a powerful image to reflect on.
It is.
And so much to think about, so much to unpack. That's what makes these deep dives so rewarding.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this exploration of 2 Corinthians 4, verses 1 through 18.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep seeking the light.